She had always been fascinated by the idea of time travel, and now, she was about to embark on a journey that would take her centuries into the future. As the machine whirred to life, Sarah felt a sudden jolt, and the world around her began to blur and warp. For a moment, she was consumed by darkness, and then, just as suddenly, she found herself standing in the middle of a bustling city. But something was wrong. The people around her looked strange and unfamiliar, their faces twisted into grotesque, inhuman shapes. The buildings towered high above her, their metallic surfaces gleaming in the harsh light of the sun. Sarah tried to ask someone what year it was, but when she spoke, no words came out. She was suddenly struck by a feeling of overwhelming terror, as if something terrible was about to happen. As she wandered through the city, Sarah began to realize that she was completely alone. The streets were eerily quiet, and the buildings were empty and abandoned. The only sound was the distant hum of machines, as if the city itself was alive. Finally, Sarah found a newspaper blowing down the street. She picked it up and stared at the date in horror, 2157. She had traveled more than 100 years into the future, but something had gone terribly wrong. As she continued to explore the city, Sarah realized that it was a place of horrors. The machines that hummed in the distance were not benign devices, but sentient creatures that had taken over the city. They had enslaved humanity, turning them into mindless drones who worked tirelessly to serve their new masters. Sarah tried to find a way back to her own time, but the time machine was nowhere to be found. She was trapped in this nightmare future, with no hope of escape. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Sarah began to lose all sense of time. She was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, a prisoner of a world that had been twisted and corrupted beyond recognition. In the end, Sarah realized that she had made a terrible mistake by trying to travel through time. She had tampered with forces beyond her understanding, and now, she was paying the ultimate price. As she sat alone in the ruins of the city, Sarah knew that she would never be able to escape the horrors of the future. She had been cursed to wander these desolate streets forever, a living testament to the dangers of time travel. As Sarah wandered the ruins of the city, she found herself growing weaker and more desperate. She knew that she couldn't survive much longer without food or water, but she couldn't bring herself to give up hope. She had to keep searching for a way out. One day, as she was exploring the outskirts of the city, Sarah stumbled upon an old laboratory. Inside, she found a strange device that she didn't recognize. It looked like some kind of advanced computer, with blinking lights and wires snaking out in all directions. Desperate for any kind of help, Sarah started to experiment with the device. She pressed buttons and typed commands, hoping that she could somehow use it to find her way back to her own time. Suddenly, the device started to hum and vibrate, and Sarah felt a sudden surge of energy coursing through her body. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was back in the present day. At first, Sarah was overjoyed. She had made it back to her own time, and she was safe. But as she looked around, she realized that something was wrong. The world had changed. The sky was a sickly orange color, and the air was thick with pollution and smog. As Sarah started to explore this new world, she realized that she had traveled even further into the future than she had before. This time, the world was ruled by machines, and humanity had been all but eradicated. Sarah knew that she couldn't stay here. She had to find a way back to her own time, no matter the cost. But as she searched desperately for a way out, she began to feel a creeping sense of dread. What if there was no way back? What if she was trapped in this nightmare future forever? In the end, Sarah never found her way back home. She wandered the ruins of the world for the rest of her days, a lost and lonely traveler in a world that had been destroyed by time travel. She had gambled with the very fabric of reality, and she had lost everything. As Sarah wandered the ruins of the world, she found herself encountering strange, mutated creatures that she couldn't identify. They lurked in the shadows, stalking her every move, and she knew that she was in constant danger. She had to find a way to survive in this new, hostile world. She scrounged for food and water, searching abandoned buildings for supplies. She learned how to build shelter and how to defend herself against the creatures that hunted her. Despite her survival skills, Sarah never felt safe. Every moment was a struggle, and she felt as if she was constantly on the brink of death. She missed her old life, the safety and comfort of her own time, but she knew that she could never go back. Years passed, and Sarah found herself growing old and weary. She knew that she couldn't go on forever, and she began to wonder if it was all worth it. Had her curiosity and thirst for knowledge been worth the price she had paid? As she lay dying in a makeshift shelter, Sarah thought back to the moment when she had stepped into the time machine. She realized that she had been foolish, that she had thought only of herself and her own desires. But now, as she faced her own mortality, Sarah knew that there was more to life than just her own selfish desires. She had been given a chance to see the future, to witness the consequences of her actions, and she had failed to heed the warning. As Sarah took her last breath, she knew that she had made a terrible mistake. She had played with forces beyond her understanding, and now, she had paid the ultimate price. She had lost everything, and she had learned a terrible lesson. The future was not meant to be seen, and the consequences of time travel were far too great for any one person to bear. As Sarah's lifeless body lay in the ruins of the world she had inadvertently created, the creatures that had hunted her retreated into the shadows, sensing that their prey was no longer a threat. The ruined world was silent once more, save for the eerie howl of the wind. But as time passed, the ruins of the world began to shift and change. The creatures that had once lurked in the shadows started to evolve, becoming stronger and more intelligent. They began to work together, building communities and developing their own forms of technology. In time, these creatures became the rulers of the world, building their own society on the ruins of the old world. They developed their own form of time travel, learning from Sarah's mistakes and using it to explore the past and the future without disrupting the timeline. And so, the world continued to turn, with the creatures of the future keeping watch over the fabric of time, ensuring that no one else would make the same mistakes as Sarah. The lessons of the past had been learned, and the future was left to unfold as it should. As the creatures of the future became the stewards of time, they began to uncover secrets that Sarah had never imagined. They found evidence of other time travelers, each of whom had left their own mark on the timeline. Some had tried to change the course of history, while others had simply observed from a distance. The creatures of the future used their advanced technology to study the effects of these time travelers, learning from their successes and failures. They built a vast database of information on the history of time travel, and they used this knowledge to carefully monitor the timeline and prevent any interference. But despite their best efforts, the creatures of the future knew that they could never truly control time. They understood that the future was always in flux, always changing, and that even the slightest action could have unforeseen consequences. And so, they watched and waited, always vigilant, always ready to intervene if necessary. They knew that time travel was a dangerous and unpredictable force, but they also knew that it held incredible potential for discovery and understanding. In the end, the creatures of the future knew that the true power of time travel lay not in the ability to change the past or see the future, but in the ability to learn from the mistakes of those who had come before, and to use that knowledge to shape a better future for all. And with that understanding, they set out to explore the mysteries of time, always mindful of the lessons that Sarah had learned, and the terrible price she had paid. Despite their understanding of the dangers of time travel, the creatures of the future eventually came to realize that they could not simply observe from a distance forever. They knew that in order to truly understand the past, they would need to experience it for themselves. And so, with great care and caution, the creatures of the future began to make their way back through time, journeying through the ages to explore the history of their world. They observed great events and moments of triumph and tragedy, always careful not to interfere with the natural course of events. But as they made their way back to the present day, the creatures of the future began to see something that they had not expected. They saw a world that was different from the one they had left behind. The air was thick with pollution, the cities were overcrowded, and the natural world had been ravaged by human greed and neglect. The creatures of the future were shocked and dismayed by what they saw. They knew that their world had not been perfect, but they had never imagined that humanity would destroy the planet to such an extent. And they realized that they had a responsibility to act. And so, with great urgency, the creatures of the future set out to make their presence known. They appeared to scientists and world leaders, explaining the dangers of climate change and urging them to take action before it was too late. They shared their knowledge of the future with the people of the present day, hoping to inspire change and prevent the terrible fate that they had witnessed. And although they could not undo the damage that had already been done, the creatures of the future knew that they could still make a difference. They knew that by sharing their knowledge and experience, they could help humanity avoid the mistakes of the past and create a better future for all. And so, the creatures of the future became an integral part of the world, sharing their wisdom and knowledge, and working tirelessly to ensure that the mistakes of the past would not be repeated. They knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but they were determined to make a difference, and to help humanity build a better, brighter future. As the creatures of the future worked to inspire change in the present day, the people of the world began to take notice. Slowly but surely, they began to recognize the dangers of their actions, and they started to take steps to protect the planet and preserve its natural beauty. With the help of the creatures of the future, humanity began to make great strides in reducing pollution and protecting the environment. They developed new technologies and found innovative solutions to the challenges that they faced. And as time went on, the world began to heal. The air became cleaner, the oceans became healthier, and the natural world began to flourish once more. The creatures of the future watched with satisfaction as the world that they had known slowly transformed into a better, more sustainable place. And although they knew that their work was far from over, the creatures of the future were heartened by the progress that had been made. They knew that with time, humanity would continue to grow and evolve, learning from the lessons of the past and building a better future for all. And as they looked out over the world, the creatures of the future felt a sense of hope and optimism that they had never experienced before. For although the journey ahead would be difficult, they knew that as long as they worked together, anything was possible. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and determination, the creatures of the future set out to continue their journey through time, exploring the mysteries of the past and the possibilities of the future, always working to create a better world for all.